The Maronite bishop, Catholics don't see in the Pope Francis the fatherly character of the previous pontiffs. What's he mean by that?
Yeah, so the bishop, his name's Anthony Spinosa. He's a Syriac equivalent of an auxiliary bishop. And he's rector of the Basilica National Shrine of Our Lady of Lebanon. He was interviewed by John Henry Weston.
Yeah.
And he said this. He said, he started explaining about uniting the clans, and he's asking him questions about far right-wing events. And Bishop Spinosa, he says, it really energizes me because I see people at this unity conference by John Henry Weston and Michael Matt.
Yeah, that was a great conference. 800.
He goes, because I see people who are very appreciative of the faith that they have, and there's confusion amongst them. It's not always their fault, and they're looking for answers. They're looking for stability, the bishop said. They want to be good Catholic people, and sometimes they feel marginalized. And I come across this all the time, and it's just not the laity, but the clergy as well. So Bishop Spinosa, who's a Maronite bishop, he said he also addresses the problems of the Francis pontificate, comparing them to the approach that St. John Paul II and Benedict XVI had to the papacy. Bishop Spinosa, the Maronite bishop, says that people look to leaders for clarity and for something fatherly. Recalling the papacy of St. John Paul II, Spinosa said that the Pope was universally loved, whether one disagreed with him or not. Benedict, meanwhile, was a scholarly man, quiet but gentle. Looking at Francis, however, Spinosa observes that people do not see the same gentleness in him, with statements that can be confusing and contradictory and don't strike us as fatherly. Bishop Spinosa looks to Francis, accusations of the Italian word indietrismo, being, as he's always saying that about being backward looking. He says that about conservatives. That's what he says.
Sure.
Americans, backward looking, as something that parents don't do with their children, and that many were hurt by what he said, even if Francis didn't mean it that way. Terry, and I agree with the bishop here that Pope Francis, he's broken rank from the last two popes. For example, can you imagine if Pope John Paul II or Pope Benedict would have slapped an Asian woman in the hand?
No.
Can you imagine the media nightmare that would have happened? You saw what Pope Francis did, right?
Yeah.
He slapped an Asian woman in the hand.
Sure.
And just some of the cutting remarks that he's made, calling people backwards. If Pope John Paul II or Pope Benedict used that word, saying liberals are backwards or modernists are backwards, boy, man, there would be a firestorm, Terry.
Well, let me give you two examples. You know, the Holy Father said, don't breed like rabbits early in his pontificate.
That's right.
That offended a lot of Catholic families with big families. And that, can you imagine John Paul II saying that? No, or Benedict, no. Wow. And there's one more thing that just recently he did with the homosexual groups, the Catholics for Choice, in the sense of the homosexuality. He's meeting with them and telling them they're doing good work with the sister who was condemned in previous popes. See, here's the thing, Jesse. Something can't be right or wrong 20 years ago and right 20 years later, okay? That just, you can't, logically, it doesn't equate. And so I would say this, and this is my take, and you can correct me right on the air, Jess, if I'm wrong. The Holy Father does a lot of, he models a politician called Perón in South America. He even said it. He listens, he rules like Perón did. And what that means is, you go to one side of the constituents and say this, and then you go to the other side and you say that. I'll give you an example. This whole week he's been visiting with homosexual groups, saying that it's legitimate. You know, we need to get rid of this teaching that homosexuality is not legitimate in the Catholic Church. And then on the same time, he says, oh, and by the way, women cannot be priests. And that's going to make the people who are conservative be happy. Hey, the Pope says you can't see, so why are we talking about it? But here's the point, Jesse. That's a political motive that is done by Perón, and he's done that for 10 years. So I'm not judging. I'm just saying I'm looking at the facts and saying, Holy Father, stop being political, man. Just stick to the teachings of what the parental teachings of the church, and I'd be a happy camper.
Yeah, amen.
Am I wrong, Jess? Tell me.
Yeah.
That's it.
We've been seeing it for 10 years. He says one thing to one audience and says the opposite to another audience.
That's how I see it.
Okay. And we've seen that factually. This bishop from the Maronite bishop says, We also touch upon, he says, this is what bothers people. There's ambiguity. There's lack of clarity.
Yep.
There's not so much teaching now as much as being involved with other things, being concerned with other things, which are valid points, whether it's climate change or social issues or whatever it is. We have to be involved in all that, but we also need to know the teachings of the church, says the Maronite bishop. He says, we also touch upon the alphabet issues in our discussion. His Excellency points to Genesis exposition that God made man, male, and female.
Yeah.
It's set from the very beginning, and I don't see how we can change any of that, Bishop Spinosa, the Maronite bishop, said. He said, as sympathetic or empathetic as anyone would like to be, you cannot change what goes back to the very beginning of creation.
That's right.
He also notes that Benedict XVI, when still in charge of the dicastery, then Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, said that pastors ought to approach those with same-sex attraction by not rejecting them. He says, the Maronite bishop says, you have to help authentically. When you compromise the faith of the church, the beliefs of the church, or the morals of the church, or whatever it might be, you're not helping the individual. Actually, you're doing them great harm.
Thank you, Bishop. Of course, common sense.
It doesn't mean the problem will go away.
Right.
We just have to work a little bit harder as to how we're going to bring individuals like this closer to God.
I love his attitude.
So Bishop Spinosa, the Maronite bishop, however, an even more upsetting prospect to this bishop is to consider is how we continuously hear of absurdities that would not have been imagined a few years ago. In our day, Bishop Spinosa, the Maronite bishop, continues, these same people insist they cannot be told how to live their lives. But the church has the obligation to do that because the church has to speak the truth.
That's right.
And it has to be done with kindness and charity and all Christian love, obviously. But you cannot compromise the truth. And this is where we're tripping up.
Exactly.
Laments. We're trying to help in any way possible, but we're also compromising the truth. This was an interview done by John Henry Weston with the bishop Anthony Spinosa of the Maronite Rite. God bless him.
You know, Jesse, we need more bishops like that, but have you noticed what's going on in just the past 6 months or a year even? I'm going to stick my neck out and say I think Bishop Joseph Strickland and Bishop Schneider and Cardinal Burke and Mueller, a handful of bishops, I think people are realizing these guys are spot on, and if we don't speak up, our faith is going to be compromised. And I really think that now you see more bishops and more lay people, more priests. You know, Father Joe Ailo up in San Francisco telling the Holy Father, "You're hurting my parish." But it was a great letter, humble letter. But you see, we didn't have that before. I think they've hit a point, Jesse, that we're going to say, look, we've had enough of this. Let's get back to what we would call black and white Catholicism, or Jesse, that we talk about. That we see things, we don't see things in gray. We see things in black and white. And I think that more people are saying that. And I want to thank the Maronite bishop for his courageous statements, because you can imagine, Jesse, his brother bishops are going to say, hey, don't do that. You're going to get us in trouble. Shut up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jess.